This is The Wicklings and the Rat Run, written by Barrel Coops.
When a flood drives a horde of rats into Pomfret House, the tiny Wicklings must use clever inventions, courage, and teamwork to protect their hidden world. Discover a heartwarming adventure of bravery, family, and the quiet heroism that shines brightest in the darkest tunnels.
The Wicklings and the Rat Run.
Chapter 1: Rain over the village. Rain had been falling for 3 days straight. It drummed on the roof of Pomfret House like 1,000 tiny fists, trickling down the old stone walls and soaking the garden paths until they squelched underfoot. Mary Pomfret sat by the nursery window, watching the gray sky fold over the village in the valley below. She heard the servants whispering in the hallway. "Flooded out," one said. "The whole lower lane. Rats, too, climbing for high ground." Mary's fingers tightened around the lantern she'd been polishing. Rats. She knew what that meant. Far beneath the nursery, behind the wainscot and under the floorboards, the Wicklings were listening too. In the attic of the west wing, Poppy paced. Her boots tapped the floor in a rhythm that didn't match the rain. Stanley sat nearby, sharpening a matchstick brace with a file made from a broken comb. Beatrix, their mother, was quiet. Too quiet. Sidney, their father, had gone to scout the pantry wall that morning. He'd said it would be quick, just to check for leaks and a listen for movement. But he hadn't come back. "He's been gone too long," Poppy said, her voice tight. Stanley looked up. "He's careful. Maybe he's waiting for the rain to ease." Beatrix shook her head. "He would have sent a signal. A thimble tap. A soot mark. Something." Old Black Nose arrived just before dusk, his fur damp and his nose twitching. "The village rats are on the move," he said, sniffing the air. "They've lost their burrows. They're climbing. And they've found the house." Poppy's heart thudded. "Do you think they've found him?" Black Nose didn't answer right away. He pressed his ear to the floor, listening. "The ground speaks of claws," he said softly. "And fear." Stanley stood. "We have to go after him." Beatrix nodded, her voice steady but low. "We'll pack light. No lanterns. No noise. If the rats are hunting, we mustn't lead them back." Mary, above stairs, left a folded cloth and a trail of crumbs near the pantry vent, just in case someone small and brave needed a sign. The rain kept falling. And somewhere in the walls of Pomfret House, Sidney Wickling was missing. Chapter 2: The Scent in the Walls. The pantry wall was quiet. Too quiet. Poppy crouched beside the vent, her ear pressed to the wood. She tapped once with her thimble. No reply. No echo. Just the soft hiss of rain outside and the distant creak of Pomfret House settling into its bones. "He should have answered," she whispered. Stanley stood behind her, holding a soot-marked map. "He's clever. Maybe he found a hollow and stayed hidden." Beatrix joined them, her face pale but steady. "Or maybe he's hurt." They didn't say the other thing. The thing with claws and teeth and a nose that could sniff out Wickling scent from a dozen tunnels away. "Rats." Poppy rose and brushed dust from her knees. "We follow the trail." Stanley nodded. "I'll bring the peppersit pouch. Just in case." They moved through the west wing wallways, lanterns dimmed to a flicker. The air was damp and heavy, and the wood smelled wrong, musty, sharp, like something had been chewing where it shouldn't. Near the old dumbwaiter shaft, Poppy stopped. "Look," she said. Shredded cloth. Wickling-sized. A scrap of Sidney's sleeve. Stanley knelt and touched the edge. Still damp. He was here. Beatrix scanned the floor. Tracks rat claws. At least 3. Poppy's heart thudded. "They're hunting." A sudden rustle made them freeze. From the shadows, a shape emerged low to the ground, nose twitching, for slick with rain. Old Black Nose. He sniffed once, then twice, and pressed his ear to the wall. "They're in," he said. "The flood drove them from the village. They've found the warm places. The food. The tunnels." Beatrix stepped forward. "Have you heard Sidney?" Black Nose closed his eyes. "Not yet. But the ground remembers. He left a trail." Stanley unrolled the map. "We'll follow it. We'll find him." Black Nose nodded. "But step lightly. The rats are listening. Poppy tightened her satchel strap. We'll bring him home. And with that, the Wicklings vanished into the walls, chasing scent, silence, and the hope that Sydney was still somewhere beneath the floorboards. Chapter 3: The Matchstick Barricade. Stanley worked in silence. His fingers moved quickly, slotting matchsticks into braces and tying cord knots with practiced care. The barricade was small, just enough to block a rat-sized tunnel, but it had to hold. He tapped each brace with a thimble, listening for the right echo. Hollow meant danger. Solid meant safety. Poppy crouched nearby, marking the wall with soot. That's the third tunnel blocked, she said. But they're still moving. I can hear them. Beatrix checked the pepper soup pouch. We'll need more. If they find the pantry shaft, they'll be everywhere. Stanley paused. He was last seen near the dumbwaiter, right? Poppy nodded. That's where we found the cloth scrap. Beatrix's voice was quiet. And the claw marks. The silence that followed was heavy. Sydney had always been the one to fix things. To lead the way. To say, we'll shore it up, even when the tunnels groaned and the walls wept water. Now he was gone, and the house felt colder. Stanley stood. We need to check the shaft. They moved quickly, lanterns dimmed to a flicker. The dumbwaiter tunnel was narrow and damp, lined with old wood and rusted nails. Poppy tapped the walls with her thimble, listening. Something's changed, she whispered. The echo's wrong. Stanley knelt and pressed his ear to the floor. A faint scratching. Not rat claws, too slow. Too careful. Could be him, he said. Beatrix's eyes lit up. Then we're close. They reinforced the tunnel mouth with matchstick braces, clicking each one into place like puzzle pieces. Stanley added a clacker line, a thread tied to a bell made from a thimble and a bent pin. If anything passed through, it would ring. Poppy scattered pepper soot near the entrance. If they come this way, they'll sneeze themselves silly. Beatrix smiled faintly. He taught you well. Stanley looked at the soot-marked map. We'll find him. We have to. And as the rain tapped gently on the roof above, the Wicklings stood guard, 3 small figures in a big, dangerous house, holding the line with matchsticks, soot, and hope. Chapter 4: The Pepper Soot Plan. The attic smelled of wax and worry. Stanley sat cross-legged on the floor, grinding peppercorns with a flat stone. Each twist sent a puff of sharp dust into the air, making Poppy sneeze. Careful, she said, rubbing her nose. We need it to make the rats sneeze, not us. Beatrix handed Stanley a twist of walnut oil wrapped in leaf paper. Mix it gently. Too much, and it clogs the wick. Stanley nodded, pouring the oil into a thimble and stirring in the pepper dust. Father's blend was better, he murmured. He knew the ratios by heart. Poppy looked away. He'll be back. He has to be. They packed the pepper soot mixture into tiny pouches made from scrap cloth and sealed them with wax. 1 pouch for each tunnel. 1 for the pantry shaft. 1 for the dumbwaiter hollow. Old Black Nose sniffed the air as he entered. Sharp, he said approvingly. That'll sting their noses. Stanley held up a pouch. We'll test it near the pantry wall. Beatrix nodded. I'll go with you. Poppy, stay here and listen for thimble taps. Poppy hesitated. But... Beatrix placed a hand on her shoulder. If he's close, you'll hear him first. They moved through the wallways, careful not to disturb the soot lines Stanley had drawn earlier. At the pantry shaft, Beatrix scattered crumbs to mask their scent. Stanley placed a pouch near the tunnel mouth and lit the wick. The flame was tiny, but the smoke was fierce. It curled through the tunnel like a whisper, sharp and spicy. Moments later, a rustle, then a sneeze. Then another. Then the sound of claws scrambling away. Stanley grinned. It works. Beatrix smiled faintly. He'd be proud. Above stairs, Mary passed by the pantry and accidentally dropped a pouch of pepper near the vent. The housekeeper muttered and swept it away, but the scent lingered. Back in the attic, Poppy sat with her ear to the floor, thimble in hand. Tap. She froze. Tap, tap. Her heart leapt. He's alive, she whispered. She ran to the others, breathless. I heard him. A signal. Near the hearth. Old Black Nose lifted his nose. Then the ground still speaks. And with peppersuit packed and hope rekindled, the Wicklings prepared to follow the sound. Chapter 5: The Rat King's Trail. The claw marks were deep. Poppy traced them with a soot-smudged finger, her brow furrowed. "These aren't from a regular rat," she said. "They're bigger. Sharper." Stanley knelt beside her, comparing the marks to the ones they'd seen near the pantry shaft. Same pattern. But this one's dragging something. A tail, maybe. Or a limp. Beatrix joined them, holding the peppersoot pouch close. "Sydney said once that rats follow leaders. If this one's leading, the others will follow." Old Black Nose sniffed the wall, then pressed his ear to the floor. One-eyed, he murmured. "Scarred. He's been here before." Poppy's heart thudded. "You know him?" Black Nose nodded slowly. "Rat King, some call him. Not a king like your stories. Just the biggest. The meanest. He remembers tunnels. And he hates light." Stanley looked at the SIP map. "The trail leads toward the west wing. That's where the old dumbwaiter runs meet the drawing room." Beatrix frowned. That's where Sydney was heading. They moved quickly, following the claw marks through narrow wallways and under floorboards. The air grew colder, and the woods smelled of damp fur and old food. Poppy tapped with her thimble, listening for hollows Stanley marked danger zones with chalk and soot. At the bend near the linen chute, they found a tuft of fur, dark, coarse, and twisted. Black Nose sniffed it. "He's close." Suddenly, a rustle. Poppy froze. A shadow darted past the vent, low, fast, and silent. Stanley held his breath. "Was that?" Black Nose nodded. "He's watching." Beatrix whispered, "Then we need to be clever." They set a peppersuit pouch near the next tunnel mouth and rigged a clacker line with a bent pin and a thimble bell. Stanley added matchstick braces to slow any chase. Poppy looked at the claw marks again. "He's leading them." "But where?" Black Nose tapped the wall. "To warmth. To food. To the hollow beneath the hearth." Stanley's eyes widened. "That's where the old chamber is." Beatrix nodded. "And maybe where Sydney is." They pressed on, hearts pounding, tools ready. The Rat King was ahead. And so was the truth. Chapter 6: The Hollow Beneath the Hearth. The trail of the Rat King led deeper than Poppy had ever gone. The Wicklings crept through the narrowest wallways, following claw marks and the faintest scent of peppersuit. The air was thick with dust and the memory of old fires. Stanley's heart pounded as he checked the soot-marked map again. "We're nearly under the drawing room," he whispered. "The old hearth is just ahead." Beatrix pressed her hand to the wall, feeling for vibrations. "Listen." Poppy tapped the wood with her thimble. The echo was strange, hollow, but not empty. There was something behind it. Or someone. A faint sound: tap, tap, tap. Poppy's breath caught. "That's him. That's Father's signal." Stanley's hands shook as he pried at a loose panel. The wood gave way, revealing a cramped hollow lined with old cloth and crumbs. In the dim light, a figure stirred. "Sydney!" Beatrix gasped, crawling forward. Sydney Wickling blinked, his face pale but smiling. "You found me," he whispered, voice rough from dust and fear. Poppy hugged him tight, tears prickling her eyes. "We thought you were lost." Sydney shook his head. "Not lost. Just hiding. The rats, there are so many. I blocked the tunnel with a broom bristle and a tin lid, but they're clever." Stanley pressed a peppersuit pouch into Sydney's hand. "We've got more tricks now." Beatrix checked Sydney's arm, where a shallow scratch bled. "We'll get you home. But we have to move quietly. The Rat King is close." A sudden scuffle echoed from the tunnel behind them. Shadows flickered, rat shapes, noses twitching, eyes glinting in the gloom. Sydney took a shaky breath. "There's a side tunnel, just wide enough for us. It leads to the pantry shaft." Stanley nodded. "We'll block the main run with matchstick braces and peppersuit. Then we'll slip out the side." Poppy squeezed Sydney's hand. "Ready?" He nodded. "Ready." Together, the Wicklings moved, quiet as dust, quick as hope, through the hollow beneath the hearth, leaving behind only the faintest scent of pepper and the promise of a family reunited. Chapter 7: The Trap That Isn't. The Wicklings moved quickly, hearts pounding with relief and fear. Sydney was safe, but the rats were still close, too close. Their claws scratched at the tunnel walls, noses twitching, hungry for anything that moved. Stanley wiped sweat from his brow. We can't outrun them forever. Beatrix nodded, her voice steady. We don't have to. We just have to be clever. Poppy's eyes lit up. A false tunnel. Like Father taught us. Sydney managed a tired smile. Lead them where we want them to go. Old Black Nose sniffed the air, then nodded. There's an old pantry tunnel, unused, but still sound. If we can lure them in, we can seal it from both sides. Stanley and Poppy set to work, using matchstick braces and cord to build a sturdy false wall. Beatrix scattered crumbs and a scrap of cloth from Sydney's sleeve, making a trail the rats couldn't resist. Sydney, though weak, helped mark the tunnel with soot and chalk, a warning sign for Wicklings, do not dig. Mary, above stairs, watched for the right moment. When she saw the rats' noses poking through the pantry vent, she hurried to the door and quietly turned the heavy key, locking it tight. Below, the rats followed the scent and the crumbs, scurrying into the false tunnel. The Wicklings waited, breath held, as the last tail disappeared into the darkness. Stanley pulled the cord, and the matchstick braces snapped into place, sealing the tunnel behind the rats. The pantry was now a cage, safe and sound. Poppy let out a shaky laugh. We did it. We really did it. Sydney squeezed her hand. You were brave. All of you. Old Black Nose listened to the ground. They're trapped. For now. Beatrix hugged Sydney, relief flooding her face. Let's go home. As they slipped away through the quiet tunnels, the Wicklings left behind only soot marks, clever engineering, and the promise that kindness and quick thinking could hold the line against even the fiercest enemy. Chapter 8: The Floodgate Trick. The rain returned with a roar. It hammered the roof and rattled the windows, turning the garden paths to rivers and the gutters to waterfalls. In the attic, the Wicklings listened as thunder rolled over Pomfret House. Stanley peered through a crack in the wall. The pantry tunnel's filling with water, he said. If we're careful, we can use it. Sydney, still pale but determined, nodded. We'll need a siphon. Something to draw the water from the old drain into the pantry tunnel, just enough to make the rats run. Poppy fetched the quill and wax siphon set from their kit. Father, you show me. I'll do the rest. Sydney smiled, pride flickering in his tired eyes. You remember the steps? Poppy nodded. Seal the seams, prime the tube, keep the flow alive. Together, they worked in the shadows. Stanley lashed the quills into a long tube, sealing the joints with wax. Beatrix and Old Black Nose checked the tunnel walls, listening for weak spots and the scurry of rat claws. When the siphon was ready, Poppy dropped one end into the rising water outside the pantry tunnel and the other into the tunnel itself. She squeezed the walnut shell bellows, priming the flow. Water trickled, then rushed, pouring into the pantry tunnel where the rats were trapped. Inside, the rats squealed and scrambled, desperate to escape the rising water. They found the only way out, the old drain that led back to the flooded village. Stanley watched as the last tail vanished down the drain. They're leaving. Old Black Nose pressed his ear to the ground. The soil is quiet. The rats are gone. Poppy let out a long breath. We did it. Sydney squeezed her shoulder. You were brave. And clever. Beatrix hugged them all, relief softening her face. Let's go home. As the rain eased and the thunder faded, the Wicklings gathered their tools and made their way back to the attic, leaving behind a pantry tunnel swept clean by water and courage. Chapter 9: The Quiet Return. The tunnels felt different now, emptier, safer, and washed clean by the rain. Poppy led the way back to the attic, her lantern casting soft golden circles on the walls. Stanley followed, carrying the last of their tools. Sydney walked slowly, leaning on Beatrix's arm, his steps careful but growing steadier with every turn. Old Black Nose paused at each junction, nose to the ground, listening for trouble. But the only sounds were the drip of water and the distant creak of Pomfret House settling after the storm. In the attic, Mary waited with a warm cloth and a cup of willow bark tea. She smiled as the Wicklings climbed through the secret hatch, her eyes shining with relief. "You're all back," she whispered. Poppy nodded, her voice thick with tired joy. "We found him. The rats are gone." Sydney managed a smile. "Not gone forever, but far enough for now." Beatrix helped Sydney settle onto a cushion. She cleaned his scratch with a bit of bark poultice, her hands gentle and sure. "You'll mend," she said softly. "We all will." Stanley checked the soot-marked map, erasing the danger signs and drawing new lines where the tunnels had held strong. "We'll need to shore up the pantry shaft and the dumbwaiter run," he said. But the barricades worked. Poppy found a small hollow behind the linen chute and gasped. Mary left a trail of crumbs and a scrap of cloth near the vent, a quiet thank you for the cat who'd kept watch above stairs. As the rain faded and the house grew still, the Wicklings gathered together, sharing tea and quiet laughter. The tunnels were safe again, at least for now. Old Black Nose lifted his nose and smiled. "The ground is quiet," he said. "And so are we." And in the gentle hush of the attic, the Wicklings rested home, whole, and together once more. Chapter 10: The Chalk Line and the Flame. The attic was warm with lantern light and the soft hum of voices. Stanley knelt by the wall, a stub of chalk in his hand. He drew a careful line, straight and bright, across the old wood. "Safe depth," he said, marking the place where the tunnels had held strong against the flood and the rats. Poppy watched, her eyes shining. "No more danger signs?" Stanley shook his head. "Not today." Sydney, his arm bandaged and his smile returning, carved a tiny flame beside the chalk line. "Kindness held the line," he said softly. "And clever hands." Beatrix placed a matchstick brace on the shelf above their nest, a reminder of the barricades that had kept them safe. "We'll keep shoring up the tunnels," she promised. "But tonight we rest." Old Black Nose sniffed the air, then nodded with satisfaction. "The ground is quiet again. The rats have gone back to the fields. The house is ours." Mary peeked through the attic hatch, her face bright with relief. She set down a folded scrap of cloth and a few crumbs, her secret way of saying thank you. "Good night," she whispered, and slipped away. The Wicklings gathered together, sharing tea and gentle laughter. The storm had passed. The tunnels were safe. And their family was whole. Stanley tapped the chalk line one last time. "We'll remember this," he said. "Every time we see the flame." Poppy smiled. "And every time we hear the ground is quiet." Sydney squeezed Beatrix's hand. "We're home." As the lanterns dimmed and the house settled into peaceful silence, the Wicklings rested small heroes in a big world, safe beneath the chalk line and the flame.
This was The Wicklings and the Rat Run, written by Beryl Coops.
This was one of the books in this series of stories about the little folk, the Wicklings. If you enjoyed this short story, please check out the playlist under the family, comedy, humor, and feel-good title on my YouTube channel for more like this.
I hope you enjoyed my short story. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. I have written over 500 short stories over the years under many pen names. I will be updating these and recording them under the Beryl Coops name. I will be listing them on YouTube as fast as we can get them recorded. They will include historical drama, humor, adventure, romance, period drama, mystery, thriller, war stories, spy stories, revenge, horror, psychological horror, dystopian, disaster, children's stories, love stories, and more. Too many to name. Something for everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find my channel. Until next time, thank you for listening to the end.